Welcome, traveler. Tonight, we'll journey through the world of Final Fantasy X, a story of love, sacrifice, and hope. Let the sound of these words guide you into rest as we follow Tidus, Yuna, and their companions through their pilgrimage across Spira. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let the story carry you away like the tide. The story begins in a place of dazzling light and endless energy, the great city of Zanarkand. A city built on water and metal, glowing with neon towers and sweeping bridges, alive with music and the roar of crowds. Here, a young man prepares to take the field. His name is Tidus. Bright blonde hair, energetic eyes, and a smile that hides a shadow of loneliness. Tonight, he is the star of the Blitzball game, and thousands cheer for him. Tidus signs autographs, greets the children who look up to him, and walks through the buzzing streets to the stadium. Inside, the game begins. Blitzball, a sport played in a massive sphere of water, looks almost magical. Tidus moves through it like a dancer, twisting, spinning, striking the ball with style. The crowd chants his name, filling the night with thunder. But in the middle of this electric excitement, the sky darkens. Something vast and impossible approaches. A monstrous creature of water and storm. Sin. Its presence warps the city around it. Buildings crumble, and people scream as tidal waves crash through the shining streets. Tidus stares upward, frozen between disbelief and fear. The city, his home, begins to collapse. And through the chaos, a man steps forward. Tall, stern, with long dark robes and a jug of mysterious drink at his side. This is Auron, an older warrior who has always watched over Tidus from the shadows. "Come," Auron says, his voice calm in the storm. Tidus follows, running through fire and falling metal. Sin looms above them, an endless wall of destruction. As they reach the city's edge, Auron turns to Tidus. He tells him this is his story now, that everything is about to change. And as the sky splits and Sin's energy crashes down, Tidus feels himself pulled into another world. Darkness swirls, lights flicker, and the voice of Auron echoes faintly. "This is your story. It all begins here." And with that, Tidus is gone, carried away from the only home he has ever known. Tidus drifts in a blur of light and water. His memories of Zanarkand flicker and fade, as if the city itself has slipped away into a dream. When he opens his eyes, he finds himself floating in the middle of an endless ocean. Waves stretch in every direction. He calls out, but no one answers. He clings to a piece of wreckage, exhausted, unsure if he will survive. That is when he notices a shadow beneath the waves. A shape so enormous it feels like the sea itself is alive. Sin is still near. The waters churn, and suddenly a metallic shape rises. A group of people in strange suits, speaking in words Tidus cannot understand, pull him aboard their salvaging ship. These people are the Bhed, a group mistrusted by the rest of Spira for their use of forbidden machines. Among them is a girl with sandy blonde hair and bright green eyes. Her name is Rikku. She speaks kindly to Tidus, explaining things in simple words, though she is as confused by his presence as he is by hers. Tidus tells her he is from Zanarkand, but the crew laughs. They say Zanarkand was destroyed 1,000 years ago, To Tidus, it makes no sense. He was just there, wasn't he? Before he can ask more questions, the ship shakes violently. Sin has returned. Its massive body looms above the sea, sending storms and destruction in every direction. Tidus is thrown into the waves again, swallowed by darkness. When he opens his eyes once more, he is alone. He washes up on the shore of a small island. His head aches, his body weak, but through the blur of sand and sunlight, he hears voices. He has arrived in Besaid, though he does not yet know it. Here, his true journey in Spira will begin. Tidus wakes on soft sand, the sound of waves crashing gently beside him. When he opens his eyes, the sun is bright, and palm trees sway above. For a moment, he wonders if everything that happened was just a nightmare. But then a shadow blocks the light. A tall man with bronze skin and bright orange hair leans over him. His voice is warm, carrying a hint of humor. This is Wakka, a Blitzball player himself and a native of this island. Wakka offers Tidus a hand and a smile. He explains that this is Besaid Island, a quiet place far from the chaos Tidus has known. Tidus, still lost, asks about Zanarkand. Wakka looks at him with confusion, then pity. He gently explains what Rikku already had, that Zanarkand was destroyed 1,000 years ago. Tidus can't believe it, but he says nothing. Wakka brings Tidus to meet his friends. Among them is Lulu, a black mage dressed in belts and flowing fur. Her tone is sharp, her words often cutting, but there's care behind her sternness. Standing silently beside her is Kimahri, a tall, lion-like warrior from the Ronso tribe. His piercing eyes never leave Tidus, as if weighing his worth. And finally, there is Yuna, a young woman with soft features and a calm, gentle presence. Her mismatched eyes, one green, one blue, seem to glow with kindness. She is a summoner, one who can call upon the great spirits known as Aeons. That evening, Tidus witnesses something unforgettable. The village gathers as Yuna steps forward. In her robes of white and blue, she closes her eyes, lifts her staff, and prays. A swirl of light fills the air, and a great winged creature appears, the Aeon Veilfor. The villagers bow their heads in awe of Yuna's gift. Tidus, too, feels the weight of what he's seeing. Something holy. Something far beyond Blitzball games and stadium cheers. As night falls, Wakka tells Tidus that Yuna will soon leave on her pilgrimage. A journey across Spira to gain more Aeons, and eventually face sin itself. Without knowing it, Tidus is about to become a part of that journey. The morning sun rises over Besaid, painting the ocean gold. The village is alive with preparations. Today, Yuna's pilgrimage begins. A sacred journey all summoners must take. Her guardians gather, Wakka, Lulu, and Kimahri. Tidus, still confused about this strange world, is drawn along with them. They leave Besaid by boat, the sails catching the wind as the island disappears behind them. The sea is calm at first, and Tidus even smiles as he watches dolphins leap beside the ship. He speaks with Yuna, who is shy but curious about him. She tells him she has always wanted to see Zanarkand, the ruins she has only heard about in legends. Tidus swallows the truth, not ready to explain that he's from the Zanarkand of the present, not the past. But their peaceful voyage ends in tragedy. They arrive at the port of Kilika, only to find it shattered by Sin's wrath. Houses are broken, the air is thick with smoke, and families weep by the water. Survivors cling to each other, their lives forever changed. As night falls, the villagers gather near the shore. The sea glows with fireflies, the restless spirits of the dead. Their cries seem to echo through the waves. Yuna steps forward, her staff in hand, her face calm and serene. She begins the sending. Her feet glide over the water as if the ocean itself carries her. She spins gracefully, her robes flowing like wings. With each movement of her staff, the fireflies rise higher, glowing brighter, until they drift peacefully into the sky. The dead are calmed, their spirits finally able to move on. Tidus watches, his breath caught in his chest. It is beautiful, and yet unbearably sad. For the first time, he realizes the burden Yuna carries, the weight of being a summoner, of comforting the grieving, and of one day facing Sin herself. When it is over, Yuna bows her head, silent and still. The villagers whisper prayers of gratitude. Tidus can only stare, awestruck, wondering what kind of journey he has stepped into. And so, Yuna's pilgrimage truly begins. And Tidus finds himself unable to walk away. The pilgrimage moves forward, and soon the party arrives at a city unlike any Tidus has seen since Zanarkand. This is Luca, the largest city in Spira, filled with ships, markets, and crowds buzzing with excitement. The great Blitzball tournament is about to begin. For Tidus, it feels like a dream. He can almost pretend he's home again, walking beneath the bright banners and hearing the roar of the crowd. But here, Blitzball is more than a sport. It is one of the few joys Spira clings to in a world shadowed by sin. Tidus joins Wakka's team, the Besaid Aurochs, who are known for never winning. Wakka, smiling as always, calls it their year. Tidus agrees to play, bringing his energy and skill to their side. The stadium fills with light and sound. Spheres of water rise as players dive in. The game begins. Inside the sphere, Tidus moves with grace, darting through defenders. The crowd cheers his name, just as they did in Zanarkand. For a moment, he feels like himself again. But outside the game, trouble brews. Yuna is suddenly kidnapped by the Bhed. They try to take her away on an airship, but Tidus and his companions rush to her rescue. The battle is fierce, machines against magic, but they succeed. Yuna is safe, though shaken. As the tournament continues, the crowd roars even louder when a new figure appears on the scene. A tall man with long black hair tied at the back, a red cloak draped over his shoulders, and a jug at his side. It is Auron, the same man who guided Tidus in Zanarkand. He fights with power and calm, cutting through enemies with his massive sword. When Tidus sees him, his heart stirs. He thought Auron was lost in the chaos of sin, and yet, here he stands. But before their reunion can sink in, a terrible shadow falls over Luca. The ocean churns, and sin rises again. The crowd panics as the creature's energy sweeps through the city. Buildings tremble, water explodes, and the tournament is forgotten in screams of fear. Tidus and Auron stand side by side once more. The old warrior looks at him and says, "This is it. This is where your story really begins." The city of Luca was still trembling from Sin's sudden assault. But the journey had to continue. Tidus walked alongside the others, his mind swirling. Seeing Auron alive, standing there as though nothing had changed, made the world feel both stranger and steadier all at once. Auron did not speak much, only offering sharp words when needed. But his presence carried weight. Tidus could sense that the man knew more about this pilgrimage, and perhaps even about him, than he was ready to reveal. The road stretched out ahead, wide and dusty, lined with green hills and stone paths. This was the Miahen High Road, where merchants, travelers, and pilgrims all moved together. Chocobos clucked cheerfully as riders passed by, the great yellow birds towering over Tidus as they trotted along. For a brief moment, it almost felt like peace, like a world not constantly haunted by sin. Along the way, Tidus tried to laugh with Wakka and asked about Blitzball. Wakka grinned, happy to talk about something light. Lulu, however, remained cool and watchful. She explained pieces of Spira to Tidus, always sharp, as though testing if he could keep up. Kimahri said little, his golden eyes fixed on the horizon, silent as stone. Tidus often caught him watching Yuna, protective in a way that felt both brotherly and distant. Yuna walked with calm grace, pausing often to greet people who passed by. She smiled gently, bowing her head when villagers wished her well. It was clear to Tidus that Yuna was not just another traveler. She was seen as something holy, someone Spira needed desperately. Tidus wondered how someone so kind and warm could carry such a heavy burden without complaint. But the high road was not only filled with friendly faces. Crusaders marched by in lines, their armor shining, their faces serious. They spoke of a plan, a great operation where they would finally strike at sin, using forbidden machina provided by the Bhed. Wakka frowned when he overheard them, muttering his disapproval. To him, using machina went against Yevon's teachings. Tidus, confused by these rules, felt only curiosity. If something could fight sin, wasn't that worth trying? The group continued along the road, facing monsters that prowled in the grass and cliffs. Tidus swung his sword eagerly, still learning to fight in this strange new world, while Lulu's magic burned through enemies with ease. Wakka's Blitzball knocked back beasts, while Kimahri guarded Yuna with silent ferocity. With each battle, Tidus felt himself slowly becoming part of their rhythm, part of their team. But as the sun dipped lower, painting the road orange, Tidus began to sense something darker waiting ahead. The laughter and small talk faded. The Crusaders were preparing for their grandstand against sin, gathering in greater numbers the further they traveled. Soldiers prayed at the side of the road, sharpening weapons with trembling hands. The air felt heavy with both hope and dread. Something vast was about to unfold, and Tidus could not shake the feeling that it would change everything. The Miahen High Road led them to a cliffside where banners whipped in the sea wind, and Crusaders assembled in long lines. Tidus stood among it all, wide-eyed. He had never seen so many soldiers gathered in one place. Bhed crews scrambled around the massive weapons they had built, strange machines with glowing cores and long barrels, aimed toward the horizon. Wakka scowled at the sight, muttering about the sin of using forbidden machina. Tidus didn't understand the faith behind it all. He only saw desperate people trying to survive. Yuna was asked to pray with the Crusaders, to bless them before the battle. She agreed with quiet determination, bowing her head as hundreds of soldiers knelt around her. Tidus watched the way she held herself, the way her soft voice reached every ear despite the roar of the ocean. He felt a pang of worry. For Yuna, kindness was strength, but here, in the shadow of sin, it felt fragile. The signal came. Horns echoed across the cliffs, and the soldiers braced themselves. The great machina roared to life, the barrels flashing with light as they unleashed their power into the sea. For a brief, breathtaking moment, it worked. A massive shape stirred in the waters, thrashing, howling, sin itself rising in fury. The Crusaders shouted, their weapons firing in a deafening chorus, explosions pounding against the beast. But then, silence. Sin's vast body turned, almost lazily, as though their attacks were nothing more than pebbles thrown against a mountain. The sea churned. The air thickened. With a single pulse, Sin unleashed its wrath. Waves taller than towers smashed against the cliffs, sweeping away men, weapons, and dreams alike. Machina shattered like toys. The cries of soldiers turned to screams, then vanished under the roar of the ocean. Tidus clung to the rocks, choking on salt water, the force of the wave nearly tearing him away. He saw Wakka fighting to hold Yuna upright, Lulu casting desperate spells to shield them, and Kimahri standing firm against the impossible surge. And above it all, Sin's vast eye glowed with cold, unfeeling power. When the water finally calmed, the battlefield was quiet. Bodies lay scattered across the shore, weapons broken, banners torn. The great army of Crusaders was gone, erased in minutes. Only fragments of Machina hissed and smoked in the wreckage. Tidus stared in horror. He had thought he knew destruction when Zanarkand fell, but this was worse. This was hopelessness, pure and absolute. Beside him, Auron's voice cut through the silence, heavy with the weight of truth. This is the price of defying sin. Yuna bowed her head, whispering prayers for the lost. Tidus clenched his fists, shaking. For the first time, he felt the crushing reality of this world. Sin was not just a monster. The road after Operation Miahin was hushed, as if the land itself mourned. Smoke drifted from shattered machines, and the sea still churned restlessly from Sin's passing. Tidus walked in silence, his mind echoing with the screams and crashing waves he could not forget. Yuna moved quietly at the front of the group, her steps steady though her face was pale. She had stayed behind to perform another sending, guiding the spirits of the fallen Crusaders into peace. Tidus had watched her dance across the waves again, just as in Kilika, and though it was beautiful, it broke his heart. So many lives ended in vain, and Yuna was the one left to bear their sorrow. The path eventually carried them onward, away from the ruins and toward the glow of a strange temple. Lightning cracked above, illuminating stone walls covered in moss and carvings. This was Jo's temple, where the great Aeon Ixion resided. Its spire pulsed with light, as if the very air was alive with electricity. Inside, guardians and pilgrims alike knelt in prayer. The group entered the cloister of trials, an intricate puzzle of glowing spheres and lightning channels. Tidus stumbled through, baffled by the strange magic of the place. But the others pressed on with practiced calm. Auron, ever watchful, gave only the faintest smirk at Tidus's confusion. At the end, Yuna stood before the faith, offering her prayer. Silence filled the chamber, and then the air shimmered as the form of Ixion, the thunder unicorn, appeared before her. She had gained another Aeon, another spirit bound to her cause. When she emerged, villagers and priests alike bowed in awe. Outside the temple, the air still smelled of smoke from the ruined battlefields behind them. Tidus asked Wakka why the people still prayed, why they still clung to Yevon when sin destroyed them again and again. Wakka looked down, torn. His faith was simple, but unshakable. He said they had to believe. Without faith, there was only despair. Lulu's voice cut in, sharper, yet sadder. She said this was the cycle of Spira. Sin comes, people die. A summoner defeats it, and the calm comes. Until sin returns again. And every summoner who defeats sin pays the ultimate price. Tidus stopped in his tracks. He had heard whispers of sacrifice before, but now the truth pressed harder against his chest. Yuna smiled gently, as though nothing was wrong. But behind that smile, Tidus felt a storm he couldn't yet understand. As night fell near the temple, the group rested beneath the crackling spires of Joes. The air was heavy with loss, but also with resolve. The road beyond Joes was quiet but heavy, the group carrying the weight of what they had seen at Operation Mihen. Tidus tried to lift spirits with his usual energy, but every glance at Yuna reminded him of the truth he was starting to understand. Her pilgrimage was more dangerous, more final, than he had ever imagined. Their path eventually wound into a strange and shadowed city nestled deep in the valley. Twisting trees formed natural arches overhead, and glowing lights burned like lanterns along the pathways. This was Guado Salam, home of the Guado people. Its leader, Seymour Guado, welcomed Yuna and her guardians with calm courtesy. Seymour was tall and striking, with silver blue hair and eyes that carried both charm and something colder beneath the surface. He spoke kindly to Yuna, praising her strength and the courage she had already shown. Tidus, still learning the ways of Spira, sensed something unsettling about him, but the others remained quiet. Seymour offered to guide them to a sacred place, the Far Plane, a world beyond life where the spirits of the dead lingered in light. Tidus followed the others, unsure of what he would see. The Far Plane opened before them as a vast lake of glowing energy, filled with fireflies drifting like stars. Shapes formed in the light, memories of the departed, called forth by thought and longing. Wakka saw his brother, Chapu, smiling gently at him. Lulu lowered her eyes, her past too heavy to share aloud. Yuna's parents appeared, her father, High Summoner Braska, standing proud in the glow. Tidus stepped forward, unsure, and then he saw her. His mother, smiling softly, just as he remembered. The sight pierced him, filling him with warmth and sorrow all at once, but something else flickered in the light, something darker. The image of Jecht, his father, formed in the fireflies. Auron's eyes narrowed, and Tidus felt anger boiling inside. His father was somewhere in all of this, tied to sin, tied to Spira. When they left the Far Plane, Seymour lingered close to Yuna. He spoke gently, but his words carried great weight. He proposed marriage to her, a union that he said would bring hope and unity to Spira. Yuna looked startled, caught between duty and her own uncertainty. The guardians bristled, Tidus most of all, though he could not say why. That night, Tidus could not sleep. The image of his father, the sorrow of Wakka and Lulu, and Seymour's sudden proposal to Yuna all churned inside him. He had thought this pilgrimage was simply about fighting sin, but now it was becoming something far more complicated. The path out of Guadosalam wound deeper into Spira, the forest giving way to colder winds and a sky streaked with pale clouds. Tidus stayed close to Yuna, still unsettled by Seymour's proposal. Yuna had not given an answer, only a quiet smile and her usual grace. But Tidus could see how heavy the question weighed on her. The pilgrimage carried them toward Macalania, a place where the air shimmered with frost and the trees glittered like crystal. The ground crunched underfoot, and every breath rose as mist. It felt like walking through a dream carved of ice. At the temple, Yuna once again entered the cloister, and soon the Aeon Shiva answered her prayer. The icy spirit stood tall and graceful, her very presence radiating beauty and power. Each new Aeon deepened Yuna's strength, and the burden Tidus feared she carried. But the peace of Macalania did not last. Seymour's true nature soon revealed itself. Whispers of his corruption began to reach the group, rumors of murder and dark ambition. When the Guardians confronted him at the frozen lake, the truth spilled into the open. Seymour had killed his own father, and his kindness was only a mask. The battle was sudden and fierce. Seymour stood tall, commanding dark magics and calling upon his own Aeon, Anima, a monstrous being wrapped in chains. Its wails cut through the icy air, shaking even Tidus's courage. But Yuna and her guardians stood firm. Aeons clashed, magic thundered, and blades struck against the Guado Lord. In the end, Seymour fell, defeated by the very people he sought to deceive. The victory brought no peace. His people would not forgive what had been done, and already whispers spread of Yuna and her guardians as traitors. The pilgrimage, once blessed by the temples, now carried the weight of suspicion and betrayal. That night, Yuna stood by the frozen lake, her reflection rippling in the glassy ice. Tidus approached, words caught in his throat. She turned to him with her gentle smile, thanking him for his strength. But her eyes carried sorrow. Tidus wanted to tell her everything, his fears, his growing feelings. But the words would not come. Above them, the sky shimmered with fireflies, and the cold winds carried their journey onward into even greater trials. Bavel rose like a fortress of stone and faith, its spires reaching high above the clouds. For Yuna and her guardians, it should have been the holiest place in Spira. But instead, it became a trap. Seymour, though defeated at Macalania, had returned through dark powers, and his influence within Yevon was strong. Word spread quickly. Yuna was to marry him, not out of love, but to bind her to his power, and to silence the whispers against him. The streets of Bavel overflowed with people. Banners waved, bells rang, and the great temple's doors opened wide. Yuna stood dressed in bridal white, her steps measured, her face calm. Tidus could hardly breathe as he watched. He wanted to rush forward, to shout, to pull her away from this nightmare, but soldiers lined every path, and their weapons gleamed in the light. The ceremony began. Seymour reached for her hand, but just as the vows were spoken, chaos erupted. Tidus, Wakka, Lulu, Kimahri, and Auron stormed the hall, fighting their way through guards. The crowd gasped as Tidus leapt onto the platform, clinging to the ropes and machinery above, his voice breaking through the chaos. Yuna! The battle spilled into the very heart of the temple. Arrows flew, spells crackled, blades clashed against metal. In the chaos, Yuna made her choice. She leapt from the platform, diving into the air rather than bind herself to Seymour. Her guardians raced to catch her, fighting off soldiers as they scrambled to escape. But there was no true escape. The group was seized, dragged before the priests, and put on trial. The temple walls seemed to close around them as judges declared them heretics. Seymour's corruption went ignored. The guardians were branded as traitors for daring to defy Yevon. Imprisoned, they were forced to endure Bevel's cloister, a labyrinth of shifting floors and glowing spheres. Tidus stumbled through, frustrated and exhausted, while Auron's voice remained steady, guiding them forward. In the end, they found themselves face to face with the faith of Bahamut, a childlike figure with a quiet, sorrowful gaze. His words to Tidus were soft but heavy, as though he knew the boy's place in a story much larger than himself. When they finally escaped, Bevel no longer felt like a holy place. Its shining walls had revealed only corruption and control. And though they were free for now, Tidus could feel the weight pressing tighter. Yuna's path was not just dangerous. It was becoming unbearable. The snow crunched softly under their boots as the party made their way toward Macalania Lake. The air was colder here, sharper, as if every breath carried with it a reminder of the battles behind them. They were fugitives now, marked as heretics by Yevon, hunted not only by Seymour's forces, but by the very people who once blessed Yuna's pilgrimage. The lake shimmered like glass beneath the moonlight, a frozen mirror stretching endlessly. Here, surrounded by the silence of snow and stars, the weight of the world seemed to pause. Yuna walked ahead, her steps light but her shoulders heavy. Tidus followed quietly, sensing her heart was far away. When they stopped at the edge of the lake, Yuna turned to him with that same gentle smile. But this time it trembled. She whispered that she was sorry. Sorry for dragging everyone into danger. Sorry for the pain her choices caused. Tidus shook his head, his voice breaking as he told her she had nothing to be sorry for. He admitted he hated seeing her smile when she was hurting inside. When the group reached the heart of the home, they found the truth laid bare. The Bhed had been trying desperately to protect the summoners, to stop them from reaching the end of their pilgrimage. They had kidnapped Yuna before, not out of cruelty, but to keep her from dying. Tidus felt his heart stop. He turned to Yuna, his voice trembling, demanding to know what this meant. And Yuna, standing in the glow of burning fireflies, could no longer hide it. She explained the final summoning. The last step of her pilgrimage was to summon a final Auron to defeat sin. But the price was her life. Every summoner before her had walked this path, giving everything so that the world could enjoy a brief calm before sin returned again. The words crushed him. Tidus shouted, desperate to understand, refusing to accept it. He begged her to find another way, to live. But Yuna only bowed her head, her expression calm yet unbearably sad. She whispered that it was her duty, that this was the choice she had made. The flames roared higher, and the airship engines shook the ground. As they escaped into the sky, Tidus stared out at the smoke rising from the ruins below. His fists clenched, his heart breaking. The truth had been spoken. Yuna's pilgrimage was not a journey of hope, but a march toward death. And he knew he could not let it happen. The words hung between them, raw and fragile. And then Yuna stepped closer. The two of them slipped into the lake, the ice beneath them glowing faintly with fireflies rising like sparks of starlight. The world seemed to fall away as Yuna leaned into Tidus, their foreheads touching, their lips meeting in a kiss that carried both sorrow and hope. It was not just a moment of love, but of promise. Tidus silently vowing to protect her no matter what, and Yuna finding the courage to let herself dream, if only for a heartbeat, of something beyond sacrifice. But the spell of the lake could not last. The next day the group pressed forward, and Yevon's forces were never far behind. The Guado hunted them relentlessly. Seymour himself returned, twisted now by death and fireflies. No longer a man, but something darker. His eyes burned with obsession, his voice dripping with false devotion as he demanded Yuna's hand once more. The Guardians stood against him, blades and magic clashing with his terrible power. Seymour summoned Anima again, its chained body rising from the void. But this time the Guardians did not falter. Aeons answered Yuna's call, striking down the nightmare once more. Even in victory, Tidus knew this battle was far from over. Seymour would return again, each time darker, and Yuna's pilgrimage would only grow harder. The night at Macalania Lake lingered in Tidus's heart like a dream. Beautiful, but fleeting, threatened always by the shadow of sin. The airship roared above the clouds, its engines thundering as the Guardians held on. But before they reached it, they had been forced to witness another devastation, one far more personal. The journey had led them to the Bhed Home, a hidden city of machines and defiance. For Rikku, it was safety, the place where her people worked to protect themselves in a world that despised them. But when the Guardians arrived, it was already burning. Guado forces had struck with merciless speed. Flames licked the walls, Machina lay in twisted heaps, and the cries of Rikku's people filled the air. Tidus rushed through the smoke, coughing, calling out for survivors. He saw children pulled away in chains, women clutching one another as fireflies rose all around them. Rikku's voice cracked as she screamed for her kin, her eyes filled with terror. Wakka froze at the sight of the machines and the destruction, torn between his faith and the reality before him. The air grew colder as the Guardians pressed northward. Snow fell in gentle sheets, and jagged peaks cut into the sky like blades. This was Mount Gagazet, sacred home of the Ronzo. Kimahri walked ahead with quiet pride, but his silence carried tension. For the Ronzo, Yuna's pilgrimage was a test of worth, and the Guardians were strangers in their land. At the base of the mountain, the Ronzo tribe gathered. Their voices were deep and stern, their blue-furred bodies towering like statues of ice. They spoke of Yuna with respect, but when their eyes turned to Tidus, they narrowed with suspicion. The Ronzo elder declared that before they could climb, Kimahri must prove himself. Two massive Ronzo warriors, Biran and Yenke, stepped forward, mocking him. They had taunted Kimahri since his youth, calling him small, unworthy, a broken horn. For the first time, Kimahri stepped out of his silence. He growled, his spear ready, and the duel began. Snow swirled around them as he fought his old rivals, each strike echoing years of pent-up anger. Tidus and the others could only watch as Kimahri stood tall against their jeers. When he finally forced them to yield, Biran and Yenke lowered their heads, offering grudging respect. Kimahri's past was healed by his own strength, and the Ronzo allowed the group passage. The climb up Gagazet was grueling. Snowstorms howled, biting into skin and freezing breath. Monstrous fiends leapt from the cliffs, testing every ounce of strength the Guardians had left. Tidus pressed forward, his body aching, but his mind restless. Ever since the Bhed Home, Yuna's fate haunted him. He couldn't stop seeing her standing in the flames, calmly accepting her death. At night, as they camped beneath the icy cliffs, Tidus lay awake, staring into the swirling clouds above. That was when dreams came. Dreams of Zanarkand, not the ruined one spoken of in Spira, but his Zanarkand, alive and glowing. He heard voices, the faith whispering to him, showing glimpses of truths he couldn't yet grasp. That his home, his very life, was tied to something beyond flesh and time. The mountain seemed endless, each step heavier than the last. And when they neared the summit, Seymour returned. His body was no longer that of a man, twisted by death, carried by fireflies. His form was colder, sharper, eyes burning with obsession. He declared that he would join with sin itself, becoming an immortal god to free Spira through destruction. The Guardians stood firm, the winds screaming around them. Magic lit the snowfields, steel clashed, aeons roared. Seymour fell again, but Tidus knew this was not the last time. Seymour's will clung to the world, a shadow that would not let go. As the group pressed on, Tidus felt the whispers of the faith stirring stronger, pulling him towards something waiting beyond the mountain. The truth of who he was, and the secret bound to sin. The climb over Gagazet gave way to silence, and ahead stretched ruins bathed in twilight. Towers of stone lay broken, ancient halls cracked and empty, yet the place pulsed faintly with the glow of fireflies. Tidus felt his chest tighten. This was Zanarkand, but not the living city he remembered. This was the truth, a dead city of echoes, worshipped as holy ground, remembered only for its end. Yuna walked slowly through the ruins, her eyes calm but heavy. Here, every summoner was meant to reach the final step. The Guardians followed close, though their voices grew quiet. Tidus felt the weight of it all pressing in, every broken stone whispering of sacrifice. At the heart of the ruins stood the great dome, lit by flames that did not burn. Inside, a figure appeared, tall, robed in flowing garments, her beauty untouched by time. This was Yuna, the first summoner to defeat sin 1,000 years ago. Her voice was soft, almost tender, as she welcomed Yuna. She told her that the path was nearly complete. All that remained was to choose a final aeon. But the truth she revealed froze Tidus's blood. The final summoning required not only Yuna's life, but the sacrifice of one of her guardians. One would become the final aeon, bound to her forever, and in that binding would give their soul. Together, they would defeat sin, and then both would be lost. The Guardians recoiled. Wakka's faith shook. Lulu's eyes burned with fury. Auron stepped forward, his voice thunderous, declaring that this cycle was nothing but cruelty, that Spira had been shackled to despair for 1,000 years. Tidus shouted that there had to be another way. He couldn't bear to see Yuna accept this fate. But Yuna, tears shining in her mismatched eyes, whispered that she had already decided long ago. Yunalesca smiled faintly, her tone soothing yet merciless. She told them that this was the only path, the only hope for Spira. And when they refused, when they dared to defy the endless cycle, her form shifted. Light and shadow swirled as she rose into a monstrous, spectral being, the air filled with the cries of the faith. The battle was long and brutal. Yunalesca rained curses upon them, her magic twisting life into death. Her form shifted again and again, each time more terrifying. But the Guardians stood together, striking with everything they had. At last, she fell, her body dissolving into fireflies. Her final words lingered, that by rejecting her path, they doomed Spira to despair. When silence returned, Yuna lowered her staff, trembling but firm. For the first time, the pilgrimage had no end. No final summoning to guide them, no ritual to bind them. The cycle had been broken. Tidus looked at her, his voice low but steady. They would find another way. They had to. For Yuna, for Spira, for all the lives lost in this endless sacrifice. And so, among the ruins of Zanarkand, the Guardians chose to fight not only sin, but the fate the world had accepted for centuries. The ruins of Zanarkand faded behind them as the Guardians pressed forward, no longer bound by Yevon's teachings. Their path was their own now, uncharted, dangerous, but alive with a new kind of hope. The airship became their base, soaring high above Spira as they set their sights on the impossible. To face sin directly, and to end it forever. The battle came swift. Sin's vast body rose from the ocean, a mountain of scales and storm. Its roar shook the heavens, and the sea turned black beneath its weight. The airship's cannons fired, tearing into the beast's flesh, while Yuna's aeon struck with light and fire. Tidus clutched his sword tighter than ever before, his heart pounding. This was no longer someone else's story. This was his fight, too. Piece by piece, they shattered Sin's armor, carving a path into the heart of the monster. And there, within its dark core, the truth revealed itself. Jecht, Tidus's father, bound as the final aeon of Braska's journey. His body was twisted by Sin's curse, but his voice still carried warmth, a weary humor only a father could have. The reunion was jagged with pain. Tidus shouted his anger, the years of abandonment pouring out. But beneath the rage was love, the love of a son who still wanted to reach the man he had hated. Jecht smiled, proud and broken all at once, and raised his weapon. "This is our story," he told Tidus. The battle between father and son shook the world. Jecht fought with all the might of Sin's power, his body towering with flames and steel. Tidus struck back, each blow carrying grief and longing, and when the final strike fell, Jecht's voice was soft, telling his son he was proud. The great shell of Sin collapsed, but their journey was not over. At the very core of it all, lay Yevon, the parasite of eternity, the mindless being that had bound sin's cycle for 1,000 years. It had no face, no heart, only instinct, to create sin again and again. Yuna summoned her Aeons one last time, but Yevon turned them, corrupting them into enemies. One by one, the Guardians were forced to strike down the very Aeons that had carried them this far. When the last of them faded, Yevon was left bare, a small, writhing shadow of its former might. Together, they struck it down. For the first time in centuries, sin was gone, truly gone. Silence fell. The skies cleared, the seas calmed. Fireflies rose like stars, scattering into the wind. Spira was free. But not all victories are without loss. Tidus staggered, his body glowing faintly. The faith's whispers returned. His time was ending. He was a dream, born of their prayer. And with sin destroyed, the faith would finally rest. Yuna reached for him, her voice breaking, begging him not to leave. Tidus smiled gently, holding her one last time before his form began to fade. He walked away into the light. His final image burned into Yuna's heart. A wave, a smile, and then nothing. On the airship, Yuna stood before the people of Spira. Her voice trembled, but her words were strong. She promised a new future, one without sin, one they would build together. The people cheered, hope blooming for the first time in 1,000 years. But when the cheers faded, Yuna turned to the sky, whispering his name. Tidus was gone, yet his story, their story, would never be forgotten. The waves rolled gently against Besaid's shore, sunlight spilling across the sand. Children played in the surf, their laughter carrying on the wind, and for the first time in living memory, no shadow of sin darkened the horizon. Spira was breathing again. The Guardians had scattered for now, each carrying their own wounds and hopes. Wakka and Lulu returned to Besaid, their bond growing deeper as they prepared for quieter days. Kimahri returned to Gagazet, leading the Ronso with the quiet strength he had proven. Rikku remained restless, her laughter bright but her resolve sharpened. The Albed would no longer hide. And Auron, his watch had ended. His duty, carried across 2 generations, was finally complete, and the Fireflies had taken him home. Yuna walked alone at times, her staff no longer a tool of sending, but a memory of what she once was. The people called her High Summoner, their savior, their beacon. Yet her heart carried silence where Tidus's voice had once been. In the nights, beneath starlit skies, she would close her eyes and whisper into the wind, hoping that somehow he could still hear. For Tidus, there was no more city of lights, no Blitzball cheers, no crowds. He drifted in the endless glow of the faith's dream, their voices fading around him. But before the silence swallowed him completely, he thought of Yuna's smile, of her courage, of the night they shared on the lake. And he knew that even if he vanished, he had lived something real. Spira moved forward. The temples no longer held the same power. The old teachings fell away, and new questions rose. For the first time, the people had to decide what their world would be without sin, without sacrifice. It was frightening, but it was also freedom.
And somewhere in that freedom,
In the warmth of the ocean breeze and the whisper of the fireflies, the memory of Tidus lingered. His laughter, his stubbornness, his hope. His story had ended, but the echo of it remained, woven into the new calm. Yuna raised her face to the sky, her voice soft but steady. "I will continue to journey," she said. "For him. For everyone." After Sin's defeat, the Guardians each followed their own path, their lives forever changed by the pilgrimage. Yuna returned to Bhed. Though the world called her High Summoner, she no longer carried the title with pride, but with humility. She stood before the people not as one who sacrificed, but as one who dreamed of a future where no one would have to. Her strength became the foundation of the new Spira. Wakka laid down his Blitzball for a time, finding comfort in rebuilding his village. His heart began to soften toward the Bhed, his anger replaced with understanding. And beside him was Lulu, whose calm wisdom guided him. Together, their bond deepened into love, and they began to imagine a family in this new world. Kimahri climbed once more to Mount Gagazet, where the Ronso awaited him. The tribe looked to him now as their leader, their protector. The quiet guardian who had once stood in shadows finally found his voice, guiding his people toward peace. Rikku remained a spark of laughter and light, but her resolve grew firm. With the Bhed no longer hiding, she worked to build bridges between her people and the rest of Spira. Her joy was her strength, her smile a reminder that even after fire and loss, hope could shine. Auron, who had walked both life and death to see Braska's and Yuna's journeys complete, finally laid his burden down. His form dissolved into fireflies, but his presence remained. In Tidus's memories, in Yuna's heart, in the story of Spira itself. And Tidus, though his body was gone, was never truly lost. His story lingered in every corner of Spira, carried in Yuna's prayers, in the laughter of children who no longer feared sin, and in the wind across the seas. He had been a dream, yet he left behind something more real than anything else: love and the will to change a world. As the sun set over Bhed's shores, Yuna lifted her face to the horizon. She whispered a quiet, "Thank you," to her guardians, to the people of Spira, and to Tidus. His story had ended, but hers was still being written. And so the tale of Final Fantasy X closes not in despair, but in renewal. A promise that even in loss, there can be love. And even in endings, there can be new beginnings. And so, the tale of Final Fantasy X comes to a close. Sin is gone, Spira is free, and the memories of Tidus and Yuna linger like whispers in the wind. If you enjoyed this story, gently press like. Leave a comment sharing your favorite part of the journey, and subscribe for more bedtime stories from the worlds of games we love. Until next time, may your dreams be calm and your rest be peaceful.